Welcome to join today's event focusing on investor relations and what to take into consideration when planning your next round. My name is Minna Åkerholm and I work as a relationship manager at Nordea Startup and Growth in Helsinki. Most of our customers are looking for funding and equity at some stage of their growth journey. With me today, I have Reima Linnanvirta, who is a key player within the Finnish ecosystem for startups. You work as an angel investor. You're also the chair of FIBAN in the Finnish Business Angels Network, and you're also a board member at many startups. What made you come into the startup world?
Well, it was sort of an accident. So I've done my career in business consulting, first M&A, then refinancing. I started my career at Ernst & Young, did mergers and acquisitions until Lehman Brothers collapsed. And for some reason, there was no longer mergers and acquisitions, so I moved to refinancing. And in 2010, I started with one of my former colleagues, our own company called Older & Sound. And during this journey, I had worked with startups, especially relating to their fundraising, but also in their later exits. And I started to find the startup world somewhat intriguing. So I did some angel investments on the side. And when I exited myself from ANS in 2015-2016, I was like every entrepreneur, what they believed, what they do when they exit, that, okay, now I can just retire, I can travel around the world, play PlayStation, whatever I want. And after 4 months, it got boring. So I actually started to work a bit more with some startups. Yeah, maybe take a part-time job in this, maybe do some investing, help in fundraising, help in board work. And fast forward today, it's 27 companies in the portfolio, 7 exits. So what started as a part-time sort of fill your schedule kind of hobby, one might say, I actually ended up more or less being a full-time angel investor.
That's really interesting and really a great journey. So what should the companies or founders take into consideration when they are looking for funding?
I think the most important thing before you start looking for funding is that what else you're looking for than just the funding. So different kind of investors have different things that they can bring to the table. And what is typical with angel investors especially is that they are former entrepreneurs, business leaders, and they have expertise in several areas that can help your business. And one of the reasons that they are angel investors is that they want to give back to the community. So meaning that they don't want just to give money, but also their expertise. So that would basically be that, can there be more than money, because that helps you to find the right investors. And same goes to a certain extent to VCs as well. They have different theses they are focusing on, they have different ways of helping startups. But also I think that from fundraising point of view, before you raise funding, you commit that this is an investor case. And a startup to be an investor case, for example, means that most likely your investors expect that you are growing the company and you are planning to exit the company. So it's not just something that you do to get the money and get things done with that money, but you're actually buying a ticket for a 10-year journey and you agree to take the next steps if they come along.
So you need to think a bit further and actually think about the impact of taking in the money.
Yeah, and it's for instance, if you take in VC money, the VC investors typically invest in 10-year period. So they want to exit the company in 10 years. They don't want to exit the company in 2 years. Yeah. So meaning that once you've taken the money, you grow the company for 2 years, then you take in more money, grow the company for 2 years, then you take in more money, grow the company for 2 years. So this is the kind of track that you need to have the opportunity. Of course, it doesn't always happen. Some companies are sold earlier, some go bankrupt, some start to transform from the startup company into more of a lifestyle business.
Yeah. So what are the most common mistakes that founders make when they are searching for a new investor?
I think the hastiness. So you're just looking for money and you go to every direction you want. And the first question to always ask is that, what are you actually looking the money for? Why are you doing the fundraising? And that, for example, takes that what you need to achieve. So you can communicate what are the goals with the funding and also do a reality check yourself that can I meet those goals with this funding? And that also takes you that what is the right kind of investor. So if you're looking to hire 10 people, it means that 100,000 doesn't work out. You need to probably raise something like 1 million. Yeah. And if you're raising to 1 million, you should probably be going to the seed round VCs instead of pre-seed round angels.
Yeah. You talk a lot about sort of the value that the investors are adding into the company and the competence that they bring with them. How would you describe a value-adding investor, and what does that require from the company?
Yeah, of course that varies a lot. So every investor is different, and even among angels, there are some who like to be very hands-on, almost like angel founders, really helping founders on the day-to-day basis, and there are some who are very hands-off. But I would start that the typical ways are network. So if you need connections to customers or future financiers, or maybe finding right people to join your team, investors typically are network persons who can help on that direction. If they are, for example, being in that same industry, they probably have the customer connections. Or if they are active angels like myself, they have the investor connections. They know who is the right investor in the next round, and also know that what is the thinking behind the thesis of the VC. So thesis meaning that what they are looking for their investment targets. Yeah. And when you really understand that, then you know that does it make sense to pitch to investor A or investor B. But in order to embrace the skills that the investors might bring into the table, one is of course that you need to be able to take the information. Investors use the term coachability. So none of us is born ready. So some of us are really skilled of running a startup, but at least I've been an entrepreneur 4 times, and still now I work with 27 companies. Still I feel like that every day I learn something new about being an entrepreneur. And
you also share that information with your startup tips.
Yeah, no, and that is also actually the startups started that I think in December I was looking into that. I have this habit that if I give a tip to a startup, that actually I feel is something that is not only for one case but useful to other companies, I write it down, because I've realized that I have the habit of giving the same information, giving the same tips, or learning from the same mistakes, and sharing it with all the companies in my portfolio. And I actually looked at that list in December, and there's over 400 of those. So if I scrap the worst 30, because not all of them are good, I can post one in every day. So that's how Startup Tip of the Day was born, bit accidentally. But that is the sort of the benefit of an active investor, because you see not one company, but 10 companies, 20 companies, what they are doing, what works, what doesn't, and you can leverage that in other startups. It doesn't mean that what is working in startup A is working with startup B, but at least we have a starting point. We know that this is something that has worked in the past, we can try it again. But what I think is more important is actually the mistakes, because things that don't work in startup A usually don't work in startup B either. And this is a saying that I always say to my portfolio companies, that I have done a lot of mistakes. If you don't repeat all of them, you're gonna be doing quite fine.
Yes. So you don't only get the support of your investor, you also get the support of sort of the other portfolio companies and their learnings that they have gained on the growth journey.
That is the business of business angel, leveraging your knowledge. And you get instead of running one company, you are involved in many, so you get the input from many companies as well. But once again, this is just one way of doing it. Some business angels tend to work with, for example, just 5 companies, but then they are leveraging their existing experience. And of course, it's sometimes useful, but it also might be that you have 30 years, angel investor with 30-year experience from heavy metal industry. If he's advising software startup, you need to think about what is relevant and what's not. there's actually surprisingly relevant even in different businesses. Team building is the same, going to market is pretty much the same, building the business, setting up the management structure. But then if you try to think about the customer value point of view, well, you need to understand the customer.
Yeah, of course. So the companies doesn't only have one round. As you said, they have multiple rounds when they grow. So what should they sort of take into consideration when moving from round to round? And should they be looking all the way to sort of a few rounds ahead when they plan the next round as well?
Yeah, I think you need to look at the ultimate goal. So what is the... I always like to start from thinking about the exit when I make the investment. And this is what I ask from the founders. And usually I don't want this typical question that how you're gonna exit, oh, Google's gonna buy it. My starting point is why somebody would buy you. Yeah. And that actually puts you thinking that, okay, why would the Google buy you? And is they buying your product or your customers or your technology or your team? And that starts to tell that what you actually need to develop. Yeah. But if we go to the planning of the funding, a couple of critical elements. What you need to succeed after this funding round in order to be able to raise the next funding round on a right valuation. And getting the understanding that what kind of milestones you need to achieve, what kind of metrics, KPIs you need to hit in order to get, for example, $500,000 at $2 million valuation. You need to understand, for example, if you are in a SaaS business, that what kind of monthly recurring revenue is required, what kind of growth rate is required. But also for that investor who puts in the $500,000, they need to get 10x, 10 times the money back. So after the money, the company is valued $2.5 million. What does it take to get the company to $25 million in valuation? And once again, in going those, we know that, okay, we probably need to raise again. What milestones are in there? And then finally comes that you need to protect your cap table at the same time. Yeah. So typically VC investors require that after a round, they prefer that the founders have over 50%. And since each round typically dilutes some 20%, this means that after seed, you need to have 65, after pre-seed, you need to have 80. And this is if all goes well, but usually there is at least one or more pre-rich rounds. Yeah. So you need to work room for those as well. Yes. And the mistake that I see quite often is that you had the first family and friends investors, they have put in 50,000 and the founders have given up 25%. It's already an investable company, right after the family and friends joining in.
So you need to make sure that you as a founder are not giving away too much of your company at each round and think about...
And I said that most important is too early. Because it's too early, it's easy to give up too much. When you enter into the later stages, if you are investable, you probably get more than just one offer. So that way the situation that somebody tries to take too high stake, it's not as big risk. But in the early stages, you take in what you can take. And also, usually in the early stages, the founders are on the learning curve, still learning the realities of fundraising. Yeah. And this kind of thing that, you need to have 50% after a round is something that you probably don't consider when you're just looking at, we finally can start this thing.
Yes, and got in some money to do what we want to do. Yeah, no, that's true. The world has been under a lot of change the last 2 years with the pandemic ongoing, but at the same time we can see that has not sort of had a negative impact on the investments coming to Finland. There's been a lot of investments ongoing anyway, but how do you see, what has the sort of impact of the pandemic been?
I think that it was sort of a temporary shock, I would say. So if you look at last year in Q1, we had very normal, so the investment activity was actually a bit in the early end, it was a bit more active than what it was on the year before. But on Q2, nothing happened. Yeah. So of course, everybody started to see what is happening. And two things happened in that respect. One was that the investors started to focus on their existing portfolio companies, so ensuring that they have enough capital, enough runway to survive past the pandemic. And also, of course, the startups reacted. And they started to protect their capital, so basically cutting down the costs or at least not investing too much. And that's actually impacted what the Q3 and Q4 last year looked like. So actually the investors were back in the markets, but now the good companies had protected their runway. They were not fundraising. So only the companies that had already run out of capital were fundraising. And of course, those are not the ones that are attractive to the investors. So actually, to quite extent for that reason, in the autumn last year, we saw mainly follow-on investments to the existing portfolio companies. But now in this spring, I would say that the angel investment activity returned to normal. But one thing that is still affecting, and I'm already seeing change here, but is that there's less startups. So of course, in the middle of pandemic, who is going to quit their job and start a startup? Yeah. So now it's picking up again, but there was also a bit reduced deal flow for a while. Okay. And if we combine this, that we have lost sort of a 1 year on the pre-seed seed level and half a year on those initial tickets, and we have more money than ever in late seed and A rounds, it means that there is a bottleneck coming right actually where the angel investors are.
Yes. That's really interesting, but it makes sense. Of course, you would like to ensure the money that you've already invested so that those companies are sort of growing as planned.
Exactly. And I think that also what really highlights the nature of startups was that the companies reacted very fast. So I still recall when the COVID hit, first companies in my portfolio actually got hit because what happened in China, they had China a major part of their supply chain. And already at that point I knew that, okay, I didn't see any global pandemic coming, but I saw that, okay, this will disrupt the markets because so much of these supply chains were disturbed. Yeah. But when the sort of big hit came to Europe, I pretty much had this crisis management headquarters that I had a call with a startup every hour, and on the next morning I started again. I went through all of my portfolio companies and then I started again. But very quickly they analyzed that what is the impact on their business, and if there was significant negative impact, how we change, how we pivot. So the speed that the startup reacted was quite big reason that the startups actually, I think, survived or managed the shock better than most of the more established companies. Yep. They were quicker to adapt. And of course, there were companies which were winners. Yeah. Smaller and maybe more agile. Yeah. For instance, if you were, one of my portfolio companies is OgoShip, providing logistics for small and mid-sized e-commerces as a platform. Well, if you triple the amount of e-commerce, and especially if new players are entering from brick and mortar to e-commerce, and you are the one who is directed to those small companies, yes, you benefit on that one. So it's also been a positive impact on some companies. I would say that out of all of my portfolio companies, there were as many companies with positive and significantly negative impact, but most remained in the middle. Yeah, that's interesting. So when you make an investment, what is it that you are looking for? What are the sort of most important things that the founder should take into consideration? My thinking is the opposite. So first, when I look at startup, I am not looking for a reason to invest. I am looking for a reason not to invest. And this is simply that it's faster. So I got over 1,000 cases on my desk every year. So I need to get rid of the ones that I don't want to use time as quickly as possible. So for me, the starting point is that I have investment criteria. For example, that there needs to be certain level of revenue. There needs to be a team of at least 3. The team needs to have certain diversity. There needs to be certain kind of fundraising that they are looking for, certain kind of valuation. They need to be B2B and preferably software, or at least software infused service I've done a couple of hardware cases, but those are quite difficult from capital point of view for angel investor. But if the company passes all of these, then it really becomes that, as I said, I see about 1,000 cases every year. And my aim is to do 4 investments, 2 in spring, 2 in autumn. So it means that it needs to be in the top 0.4% on the whole bunch. And so it's not that I can say that, yes, this is the kind of case I would invest in, but just what I have on the similar peer group, you need to be really on top of that. And of course, nobody knows which are the winning startups in the early end, but that is where the diversification comes in. So if you do a good due diligence and you diversify, you are not putting your money after the good due diligence to the worst of those 1,000 companies. And by diversifying, you're probably hitting some of the winners and some of the outliers. But it's still the matter of angel investing that out of 10 investments, 5 you will lose money, 2 gets you money back, 2 makes modest profit, and 1 makes this holding profitable. So you really need to aim for the ones. But as said, I think that after the company has passed all these criteria, as I said, I like to start from why would somebody buy this? And I think good example was whiteboard.fi, which we invested last autumn and we exited last spring, so super fast exit. But there was that, okay, it was an online whiteboard solution for teachers that worked. It was designed for classroom use, but worked exceptionally well in online. So in this COVID kind of environment, when you are either online or offline, or you are in hybrid mode, it was a perfect tool because the teachers didn't need to change it. You can use it in classroom, you can use it online, and you can even use it, some are in classroom and some are online. And of course, that kind of product, it means that, well, we have the COVID boost, so the market to exit this is still during COVID. So we need to exit this fast. That was one criteria. Are the founders prepared to make a fast exit? Second one was, is there a buyer for this? And surprisingly, while there were so many big edtech companies, starting from Microsoft to Kahoot, that had these bulks of or bundles of edtech solutions, their whiteboard solutions were not that many or not that good. So we realized that, okay, there are actually quite a few edtech companies who would like to add these as a product on their portfolio. And then we basically worked on a structure that idea was that the company didn't have monetization, so we need to crack the monetization. Then we need to crack the scalability. And once we do that, we can take one funding round, grow it as big as we can, and then we exit. The plan worked otherwise pretty well, but before we were able to crack the scalability, and I would say that even we didn't crack the scalability, we already had 6 million monthly users at that point, but we didn't know how to drive it. It was a viral product, but we were not driving it as such. We were preparing for the funding round, but actually what happened was that Kahoot approached us, that hey, we'll look what you're doing, it seems interesting to me, should we talk? And then we ended up selling the company to Whiteboard. So in that case, what we really looked into that, why would somebody buy this? Can we see the path from this investment all the way to the exit? And is it our interest as investors and the founders' interest aligned? And in that case, how the founders saw, what I saw as an exit, the founders saw that now they have Kahoot as their parent company, sort of as an investor. And they are independent unit inside of a bigger corporation that gives them the networks, the access, but they can still continue doing what they were doing, only with totally different resources.
Exactly.
So it was win for the investors and win for the founders.
That's a fantastic story. And that also shows that you can have sort of different aims when you're growing. But that's great that they also got sort of the resources that they needed to grow further. Perfect. Thank you so much for all your insights and learnings. It was a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you. It was great to be here.
Thank you.
I think that the thing you're doing with Nordea and Kasvu Open is really, really important on the ecosystem as well.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. So, as a summary, make a clear plan for your growth, both on the short run and on the longer run. Involve all the players in the discussions, both the equity investors, public funding sources, and the bank. Also think about that when you onboard a new investor, you're not only onboarding money, but you can also get a lot of new competence into the company and access to a broader network, which you can gain of a lot. Through Nordea, you can get access to a lot of new investors also on the European market through our investor speed dating events. And FIBAN offers you a network of more than 650 angel investors. So make a plan and get started.